2024 and hip hop was all about two things, really. One, you had the OGs dominating, artists in their 50s putting out well received projects, and then you also had the huge West Coast resurgence. Yeah, it was safe to say in 2024, the West Coast was running things. What is good, y'all? It's your boy Mixtape Moth. If you are rocking with this content, go ahead and smash that like button for your boy. Also, subscribe if you haven't. But today, I'm going to be hitting y'all with my top 30 albums of 2024. Okay, so I'm about to talk about 30 hip hop albums that had high replay value for me. And just a reminder, if I do not have an album listed that you love, it's not because I thought it was trash or that it wasn't good. It just might not have resonated with me as much as it did with you. And let me be clear, there were some really good albums that dropped that I do not have listed. Ones that I could recognize as being technically good, but they still didn't do it enough for me to make the list. Also, an album may not have made this list because I simply didn't hear it. I mean, music had dropped at a faster rate than ever in 2024. And I just couldn't get through it all. But before I jump into this list, I want to hit y'all with some honorable mentions, starting with Talib Kweli. His Confidence in Knowing was produced by Jay Rawls. It's a very solid, thought-provoking project that I think was slept on. My next honorable mention would be Chuck Stranger's A Forsaken Lover's Plea. So this was a pretty laid-back and moody listen from the Brooklyn Pro era rapper and producer. There were some dope psychedelic soulful beats from the likes of The Alchemist, Chuck Stranger's Gray Matter, and Animos. Then I'm gonna go with Philadelphia Freeway and Jake One's The Stimulus Package 2. I believe this was a worthy follow-up to their 2010 album. I would next add Fleet Lord's Raised in the Sand. Now for me, this was the best Fleet Lord drop in some time. I found there to be a decent variety to the production, and he switched up his flow a bit at times, which was a plus. I would also add El Camino's The Game is the Game, produced by Real Bad Man. Now, El Camino had a super prolific year, but this would be my favorite drop from him. You had El Camino sliding over funky, soulful, and wavy beats from Real Bad Man. Next is Maxo Cream's Personification. This Houston rapper put out a well-produced project that touches upon themes like spirituality, regret, and karma from the streets. Storytelling was pretty solid throughout, and yeah, it's worth peeping. Also wanted to acknowledge a Memphis rapper named Eddie Valero. He put out a project called Undefeated that had great production, especially if you dig soulful trap. He is lyrical enough in his own right, but be sure to check this out if you haven't. Then we're gonna go with Corday's The Crossroads. This project was definitely better than Corday's previous one. It was a continuation of his deeper introspection, mixed in with some braggadocio over very soulful production. I have to highlight the great use of soul samples here. I would also add The Game and Big Hits, A Paisley Dreams, produced by Hit Boy. So Hit Boy laced these two West Coasters with some underrated production this year. And somehow, some way, The Game and Big Hit had some unexpected chemistry. Lastly, I would throw in Freddie Gibbs's You Only Die Once. So this may have been some folks' album of the year, but I didn't enjoy it that much. Let me be clear, there are some high highs on this project. My only gripe is that some of the instrumentals in the first half sounded very similar. All right, y'all, but getting right into this top 30 albums of the year, starting with number 30, I have Redman's Muddy Waters 2. Yes, of course, this just dropped the day before Christmas. It is the sequel that has gotten some pretty mixed reviews. While I don't consider it to be flawless, I still found it to be a fun and enjoyable listen with a fair share of bangers and up-tempo tracks. I'm just glad that he finally released it, so now he can move on to whatever album he may have next. At number 29, I have The East Side Is Still Easty. Yeah, it's technically an EP at just 7 tracks, but it was a G-Funk release that could be played the whole way through. Snoop's presence was definitely felt, and Trey D and Goldie Loke sounded hungry and as crisp as I remembered years back. Definitely a solid death row release to check out. Number 28, I have the God Fahim's Machine Gun Vocabulary, produced by Cartoon Beats. So this was a slept-on release from the prolific Atlanta underground artist that had some cinematic and ethereal production from Cartoon Beats, who had a great year this year production-wise. You have some dope verses from the likes of RJ Payne, Skyzoo, and Cormega as well. And of course, the God Fahim was giving you his motivational bars with that urgency. For number 27, I have Jay Skeez's Ground Level. This was one of two very solid releases from the Buffalo MC. You had a nice blend between soulful boom bap, jazz, and trap production. Really a good balance of sounds is what made it interesting for me. And Jay Skeez was coming through with some inspirational bars for the streets, telling us his story of getting it out the mud from that ground level. And it had one of my favorite singles of the year, Situated, with Big Crit and Sauce Walker. That was a banger. At number 26, I have Conway the Machine Slant Face Killer. So this Conway album had a mixed reception, but it was a fun listen for me that had a decent amount of replay value. There were some solid performances from Method Man, Stove God Cooks, Key Glock, and Joey Badass. Yeah, for some, this project kind of came and went, but when I went back to it recently, I realized that it had quite a few bangers, and it just may have had too much of a trap flavor for some traditional fans, but a solid drop in my opinion. For number 25, I have Rome Streets and Derringer's Hatton Garden Hold Up. So with Derringer on the boards, you had quite a bit of psychedelic, hypnotic, murky instrumentation that blended elements of boom bap and drumless. Definitely some haunting beats that I dug, and solid performances from Cormega, Schoolboy Q, Westside Gun, and Mayhem Loren, and Rome was razor sharp with the bars. Now, I did not enjoy this as much as Kiss the Ring. It just might have been a little too light on the drums in my spots, but still a well-crafted cinematic release. For number 24, I have Hus Kingpin and Ninth Wonder's The Super Goat. So Hus Kingpin had two other releases this year, I believe, but this project, produced by Ninth, was one of his smoothest and most polished to date. The samples from Ninth Wonder were sparkling, soulful, and overall some of his more standout work lately. Yeah, it's just a dope listen if you like Huss's unique poetic style of rhyming over Ninth production. For number 23, I have Raz Fresco and DJ Muggs' The Eternal Now. So this project contains some of DJ Muggs' jazzier beats as of late. The instrumentals weren't quite as dark as expected, which was a nice change up, and Raz Fresco did his thing in dropping some metaphysical, conscious bars as well. Definitely some thought-provoking material, and yeah, just a slept-on underground release. At number 22, I had 21 Savage's American Dream. So this was one of my favorite commercial drops of the year, mainly due to the production, which was trap, but heavier on the soul sampling, which is a plus. I didn't necessarily care for the R&B tracks here, but there were some deeper songs that I liked, like All of Me, Letter to My Brother, Red Sky, and Dark Days. This showed a different, a slightly more introspective side to 21. At number 21, I have LL Cool J and Q-Tip's The Force. Okay, so this was a project that fans either loved or hated. Now, for me, I loved LL's rapping. He appeared hungrier than he has in a long time. But the production, I will admit, may have just been a bit too experimental. That didn't make it bad, as there were some creative and quirky instrumentals that could be looked at as attractive, but I didn't really feel the urge to replay this that much as the year progressed. But from a lyrical standpoint, LL was definitely getting busy, but it is a project that you have to go into with an open mind. At number 20, I have Killer Mike's Michael and the Mighty Midnight Revival. So this was an obvious extension of his Grammy-winning Michael project from 2023, and this came across kind of like a deluxe, even down to a couple tracks having the same lyrics from Michael but with different beats. That being said, there were some dope gospel soulful tracks throughout. And if you are into Southern soulful hip hop from that Dungeon Family era, then I'm sure you will find something enjoyable from this. There were even two tracks that tapped into that old school Memphis sound, which was a cool switch up from the gospel records. At number 19, I have Crime Apple and Apollo Brown's This Is Not That. So out of 5 albums, one of them being a collab that Crime Apple dropped this year, this was my favorite. Apollo Brown came through in bringing the type of authentic, organic soul production he is known for, and you had some minimal percussion and psychedelic flavors too. But Crime Apple was on point with the storytelling here, definitely sticking to themes and topics a bit more than usual, and even perfecting his hooks. You had detailed storytelling and moments of heartfelt reflection as well. Definitely a top project from a consistent artist. For number 18, I have Mickey Diamond's Gucci Gambinos, produced by Big Ghost. Okay, so this album pays homage to Raekwon's Only Built for Cuban Links in a major way, from the cover art to the skits to the mafioso imagery to the Wu-Tang inspired soul production from Big Ghost, who definitely bodies some of these beats. The sampling was crazy, the Method Man feature was even crazier, and you also had Pro Dillinger as a co-star, which was intended to put one in the frame of mind of Ghostface's appearance on Cuban Links. Number 17, I have Currency and DJ Fresh's The Encore. This was a slept-on release from the prolific NO Spitter and the Bay Area producer DJ Fresh, who also had an active year on the boards. What stood out the most with this release was the crisp, jazzy instrumentals from DJ Fresh, who I believe used live instruments a lot. There were some colorful soul samples and just a dope theatrical presence to the beats that made it a fun, eclectic listen. For number 16, I have 38 Special's Mother and Gun. So this was 38's most personal project to date, as he talked about the loss of his mom, and he gave you glimpses into his upbringing more than before. Now, it contained only one beat from Special himself, but the other producers did a decent enough job. There were some really high highs like the first 5 songs, and the album ends on a strong note with the last 2 tracks devoted to his mom, with good performances from Benny and Shay Noor. Number 15, I have Graph's God's Timing, produced by 38 Special. So this was easily Graph's dopest project in recent years. Not only did you have that rugged, dependable production from Spesh, but Graph and the features really did their thing. There are bangers like the opener, Language. The track with Method Man was a high point. I also really dug the back and forth between Spesh and Graph on Rock, Paper, Scissors, and the Rockefeller Chain was a gem. So if you were a fan of wordplay and gritty East Coast style production, then this will likely be one of your favorite drops of the year. For number 14, I have Shay Noor's The Lotus Child. So this was Shay Noor's long-awaited solo project. It included beats from Shay herself, with the exception of one produced by Static Selecta. And I did find Shay's organic, soulful, and home-cooked production sound to be appealing. There were also some conceptual, well-thought-out records to contrast the more bloodthirsty Barfest. Yeah, this was just a tight collection of songs that peel back the layer even more to who Shay Noor is as an artist. For number 13, I have Ransom and Conway the Machine's Chaos Is My Ladder 2. This was a follow-up to Duffel Bag Rand's 2022 release, produced entirely by the underrated Harlem producer V Dawn, who supplied Ransom with a combination of dreary, ethereal, and angelic beats, definitely on the darker side as a whole though. Ransom was clearly the MVP from a lyrical standpoint. Conway didn't have as many quotables compared to his past releases, but he did bring some over-the-top street energy to the project. But yeah, Ransom had some thoughtful conceptual tracks and even a sinister vocal change up on the last track, but my favorite would have to be the menacing Hired Killer with Lloyd Banks. It doesn't get more grim. Okay, maybe it did get more grim in 2024, because for number 12, I have Lloyd Banks's Halloween Havoc 5, which was more than a worthy addition to his famed Halloween Havoc series. The production was ominous, chilling, and even melancholy, possibly too dark if I must nitpick, but it's a Halloween series, so that's to be expected. But you had a variety of producers on deck. Cartoon Beats provided the bulk. Now, of course, on the lyrical tip, Banks came through with plenty rewind worthy verses and that deep introspection, continuing to demonstrate his hunger at this stage in his career. For number 11, I have Blue and Exiles, Love the Ominous World. So this was my favorite drop from Blue, who had an insanely productive year, but I also dug his Los Angeles project with Evidence. This release displayed the continued chemistry between Blue and Exile, and even though the production was mostly rooted in boom bap, I feel they experimented a bit with the melodies. The vocal scratching was one of the high points, just the unique vocal samples were ear-grabbing and captured certain vibes. The second half of the album was even stronger because it was here where Blue was paying homage to older West Coast legends. Yeah, dope rhymes and intricate sample-based production. Number 10, I have Master Ace and Marco Polo's Richmond Hill. This was the reunion between legendary Brooklyn wordsmith Master Ace and well-respected Toronto producer Marco Polo. Now, for some reason, I preferred this over their Brooklyn story, but they're both probably equal in quality. So you had thought-provoking words from Master Ace, creative concepts, and solid storytelling. He continues to be razor sharp with the concepts and having albums that just play out like movies. And Marco Polo supplied him with dynamic production, a heavy drum presence, thankfully, and a clever use of samples. At number 9, I have J. Cole's Might Delete Later. Now, unfortunately, this album was overshadowed by J. Cole's decision to bow out of the beef. Some may have dismissed that album for this very reason. But I still viewed it as a very strong project nonetheless. J. Cole was rapping at a high level, giving us some of his most aggressive braggadocio since his mixtape days. The production was solid front to back. You had a decent amount of soul samples. Yeah, this album did get hated on for what happened, but I still maintained it to be one of the better albums due to that top-notch lyricism and production. Number 8, I have Boldy James and Nicholas Craven's Penalty of Leadership. So this prolific Detroit MC had an MVP-like year, releasing multiple well-put-together projects. Now, at the time I did the review, I said that Across the Tracks was his best, but after going back to Penalty of Leadership, it ended up having more replay value for me. Boldy and Craven have an undeniable chemistry, sort of like Ransom and Craven. The delicate and angelic samples were expertly crafted and just ideal backdrops for Boldy to spit his vivid, authentic drug bar. At number 7, I have Benny the Butcher's Everybody Can't Go. So this highly anticipated Def Jam album did not meet a lot of folks' high expectations. In fairness, Benny did set the bar awfully high with his rollout. That being said, I thought it was a strong commercial release that didn't sound all that commercial. The production from Hit Boy and The Alchemist was solid, and it showed Benny stepping outside his comfort zone just a bit without sacrificing his core sound. However, the talking points seemed to be that Summertime Butch was more for the traditionalists, but I didn't necessarily buy into that too much because Summertime Butch still had some R&B-like hooks and wavy melodies. I honestly enjoyed both projects, but I viewed Everybody Can't Go as the better one personally. For number 6, I have Benny and 38 Specialist Stabbed and Shot 2, another highly anticipated sequel that managed to be a worthy follow-up. Sure, it may not have had quite the rawness or the hunger of the original, but they still kept that formula intact in 2024. Some sharp back and forth action over mafioso string production and cinematic boom bap beats that got the job done. Both Benny and Spesh were performing at a high enough level throughout. Number 5, I had the Dog Pound's Wag, or We All We Got. So this ended up having very high replay value for me since it dropped in the summer. The Dog Pound were back under death row with Snoop at the helm like old times. This project also contained production from legendary G-Funk producers like DJ Battlecat, Rick Rock, Jelly Roll, and Superfly, as well as DJ Premier, and all the vets seem to understand the assignment in providing Dog Pound with traditional West Coast style beats. But the newer school production team of Mike and Keys actually produced the bulk of the instrumentals, showing that they could hold their own alongside the vets. Actually, Mike and Keys produced my favorite song on the album, probably one of my favorite songs from the year, low key, House Party. And that beat, in my opinion, is just as good as really anything we could have gotten from that 90s G-Funk era. I know that might be an insanely bold claim, but the beat on House Party, that's flawless. For number 4, I have Big X the Plugs Take Care. So this Dallas Texas rapper started making a name for himself in 2023. He caught my attention because I dug the soul and funk records that were being sampled in his music. Sure, Big X the Plug can rap well enough, but I gotta say, it's the production that grabs me the most. This was an album that I enjoyed more for the vibes than some other projects. Now, he did open up a bit and get a little more personal on this release, which was good, but the album contains some of my favorite beats of the year. One of the main producers he used was Tony Coles, and this guy was in his sampling bag heavy. There are so many soulful funk-backed instrumentals that hit you right away. Songs that are a nice blend between old school and newer school southern hip hop, and there's a heavy trap presence obviously, so that might not be for everyone, but this ended up being one of my go-to for when I was about to pull up to a destination. And for number 3, I have Common and Pete Rock's The Auditorium Volume 1. This project was mostly everything a 90s traditionalist could have asked for in 2024. Pete Rock proved that he still got it, lacing Common with smooth, head-bobbing, sample-based production that he is known for. Now, my only slight issue with this project that I stated in my review, and I still have it, is that it was a little bit on the mellower side, which wasn't a bad thing, as there are some bangers on deck like Wise Up, Stellar, and all kinds of ideas. There were, though, some beautiful, soulful records on here like Dreamin', This Man, A God There Is, Lonesome, and Now and Then. Yeah, not to compare, but Common and Pete Rock were the Nas and Hit Boy of 2024, and I'll definitely be looking forward to Volume 2 that is scheduled to drop next year. For number 2, I have Rock Marciano's Marciology. So some people prefer the Skeleton Key, but Marciology just had way more attention-grabbing production from my ears. Of course, Rock Marcy delivered on both in terms of having fire wordplay and quotables, but Marciology to me just had a healthy variety of styles that still fit with the aesthetic of a Rock Marcy album. Whether we are talking about the otherworldly beats found on both the opener and the closer, both of which were so sonically different from a lot of what we heard this year. I also liked the break and pace with tracks like True Love and Bebe's Kids for the funkier, bouncy production. And there were those icy psychedelic moments like Gold Crossbow, Killing Spree, and Higher Self. So I still feel Elephant Man's Bones was his best out of the last few years, but Marciology is a close second. And my favorite album for 2024 is Snoop and Dr. Dre's Missionary. Yes, an extremely polarizing project. One of the most highly anticipated in some time that did not deliver for some. And yes, I must admit that at first it didn't quite hit me. I knew I was listening to something that was well crafted, but after I had reviewed the album, I just felt the urge to keep listening and listening to it again and again. I don't know, maybe I'm still caught up in the nostalgia subconsciously and I wanted to just give it more chances, but I kept replaying this. So even though this album is not perfect, I mean, I still could have done without the Tom Petty track and maybe had a G-Funk banger or two in the traditional sense. Still, this album was very good. Vocally, Snoop sounded his best in a long time, and Dre, even though he didn't give you the traditional G-Funk that you may have wanted, he still gave us elements of G-Funk if you listen closely. It's just more modern and nuanced. I believe it was the artistry that made me come back to this project so much. I mean, there is a musical experience with this album that I feel was missing from quite a few projects this year, in my opinion. So I don't expect really anyone to have this album as their number one, but honestly, any of the albums in my top 10 or 20 probably could have been my album of the year at some point. But these were my top 30 hip hop albums of the year. In the comment section, drop what yours would be. But it's your boy Mixtape Moth. I am signing out. As always, it's peace and blessings. One.